With the biggest North American organization, Sentinels, attending their 6th International Masters, I wanted to look back through this org's best roster iterations to figure out which one exactly was the best version of this team on the biggest of stages. This led the spotlight to narrow on 2 rosters in particular that showed how much the team has changed throughout their run in the VCT. The 2021 Reykjavik champions, and last year's underdog run to win Masters Madrid. To do so, we're going to have to look at a number of different aspects of each team and really dive into what made each of them be able to lift a trophy. Alright, so to truly understand the main differences between these teams, separated by 3 years, I wanted to retrace both rosters' journeys to lifting the trophy, as both situations going into the Masters were pretty different. And we've done this a few times now on this channel, so I'm going to be pretty quick with it, but I want to specifically delve into the stats both trophy runs have had. So let's rewind back to 2021. When the esports scene looked a lot different than it does nowadays. For this 2021 roster, it wasn't a question on if they would qualify for the first internationals. It was more a question of if they could take home the trophy. This is because of just how dominant they were in North America at the time. After winning the Regional Masters, Challengers 2, and Challengers Finals to qualify, they looked truly unstoppable together. But similar stories were being seen in other regions as well, with teams like Fnatic and Crew looking impressive at home, as well as the shocking underdogs Newturn, who upset possibly an even more hyped up team than Sentinels and Vision Strikers, who would become DRX. So there was real potential that after rising so high in NA, they'd fall apart at their first real taste of the big stage. Instead of that, they went on the lone perfect tournament run in Valorant history. First defeating their biggest opponent in Fnatic, then toppling a Team Vikings roster that contained Saucy and Sawdog, then ended Newturn's Miracle run, who notably had Genji's Lakia and their head coach Solo running the team. Then to cap it off, they proved it wasn't a fluke and beat Fnatic again to end with a trophy, going 9-0 in maps. And while all these teams they beat weren't in their best form yet, Sentinels defeated 2 legendary IGLs and an IGL who'd go on to coach a team to a Masters trophy. They did have a number of close maps that went into overtime, which resulted in the round win rate not being as high as you would expect. Still amazing in an international setting and pretty much unheard of. Let's compare that high bar to the 2024 run, where the story going into Madrid was that Sentinels just went on an unusual hot streak in the kickoff event and could now really crash and burn. This was because after winning in 2021, the reputation of winning this organization first it was established on was at an all-time low after 2 terrible seasons in a row. Now they were back after defeating Demon 1 and the Optic Core on NRG, then prevailed against the last of the Classic Loud team in the Grand Finals. Now the real question was if they could keep up this hot streak against a much more mature international scene that wouldn't get caught off guard by anything anymore. So that made Sentinels really have to fight through a number of tough battles right away. They went down to the wire against Team Heretics, barely winning a map 3 in overtime against Loud, then lost to Gen G in the upper finals to have to face a peak Paper X team in an elimination match. But after winning in overtime on Lotus, they were punching their ticket to the final match of the tournament, where they're able to redeem themselves and defeat Gen G in an exciting back and forth that went all the way to a map 5. So it's obvious that this run was a lot messier than back in 2021, which makes sense given that Reykjavik was the first international while Madrid was the 10th. So the competition had equaled out a lot by then. Compared to their 2021 round win rate, they went 52.7%, which is more in line with what other Masters winning teams had in their runs, as maps have gotten a lot closer on the biggest of stages. Which leads us right into the leaders on the server for these rosters, because this comparison is a lot more interesting to dissect. Shazam and John QT, 2 leaders with drastically different backgrounds and fan opinions before they appeared on the big stage for the first time. For Shazam, he came into Valorant as a true veteran of the FPS genre, having competed in CSGO for a while before Valorant was even an idea. John QT, on the other hand, had suddenly shot to stardom after leading M80 to the edge of ascension from Tier 2, and then right away being pulled up to the big leagues to take on this massive challenge as a rookie IGL. For Shazam, of course, he had a lot more on his plate as both the strategic and in-game leader, while also flexing onto Jet at times, leading him to be one of the best fragging IGLs we've seen, particularly because that was what the meta at the time allowed. So while he did have some ideas on maps like Haven and Icebox that would become meta, the team was able to win by more relying on their superstar fraggers that made the game look a lot more like CSGO at the time. So when looking at John QT's stats overall in comparison, it's clear that Shazam had him beat, but even then not by that much given the difference in the game. But of course, fragging isn't nearly the most important part of IGLing. It's the strategy and mid-round calling that lead to IGLs making their money. And John QT right away showed that he had that down. They were able to pull off a high percentage of 4v5 advantages than the 2021 team, which is in large part due to this ability to change up the game plan on the fly and still pull off critical round wins, both boosting their confidence and destroying the mental of the other team. So when looking at how big of an overall impact they had on their team's strategic success, I'd have to give it to the rookie IGL, especially because the stats weren't as big of a difference than I would have thought given how much Shazam was known for his fragging abilities. This ties the two rosters at 1 apiece. Now with that out of the way, we're going to delve into each of the main roles: Smokes, Sentinel, Initiator, Duelist, and Flex. It won't be a perfect comparison as all these players jumped around, especially back in 2021 when the meta was wild and loved multiple duelists. So I'm just placing them into what they did most of the time during their international runs and see how they compare. Let's first get into the most underrated role, Smokes. This comparison is super fun as we get to compare the GOAT Zombs to peak Omen play 10s. And sorry Zombs, but when you look at the stats of 10s during this, it was like he was rolling back the years to 2021. Zombs of course wasn't someone that needed to be flashy. He just needed to get his one or hold down a site while the rest of the superstar team dominated everyone. That being said, he was one of the best Smokes players in the game at the time. He had a great game sense that led to a lot of attacks being holed up behind choke points, leading his team to have an insane defensive win rate. With 10s, they weren't able to win as many defensive rounds, but what 10s was good at was finding unique angles and timings that lead to way more multi-kills than other Smokes could ever do. But that is one of the perks of having one of the greats of the game as your Smokes player, giving this team a level of firepower that pushed them through tight games. So once again, I'll have to lean towards the 2024 team, giving them their first lead. So let's switch gears towards players tasked with holding down pivotal areas and setting up deadly flanks. Sentinel. If you don't remember how good Dapper was back in the day, then you might not realize how hard this is going to be, as Dapper, while not flashy, had impeccable flank timing, especially because the meta was perfect for it, letting Nats and others flourish under it. John QT on the other hand played Sentinels like how an IGL would, as a site anchor or towards the back of the main pack during the attack, with him doing a lot less flanking than what Dapper did. So now let's dive into the stats comparing each other. John QT was surprisingly more efficient than Dapper, outperforming him in all fragging stats, even while IGLing. Dapper's lack of clutches going 0-19 was particularly detrimental, especially for a Sentinel who often finds themselves in those situations. Only Shazam had more clutch opportunities and he succeeded in 6 of them. In contrast, John QT converted 14 of those clutch opportunities, achieving nearly a 20% win rate. This gives the 2024 team a 2-point advantage, positioning them to potentially secure the victory already. Now, let's examine the flex players, those adaptable team members who readily adjust their agent pool. Comparing Zelsis and Sick is challenging, as their roles were not directly parallel, a common issue when comparing teams from distinct metas. However, we can still extract valuable insights. Zelsis has primarily excelled on agents like KJ, Viper, and KO, supporting his higher fragging teammates. More than just strategy, he was the emotional core of the team. While having a vibe guy is often discussed now, Zelsis brought that idea to the mainstream. He proved that contributing significantly to a team doesn't require being the flashiest player. Simply being a positive force can be transformative. Sick, conversely, was incredibly skilled, seamlessly switching between initiator and secondary duelist roles like Phoenix or Raze. He offered aggressive dynamic firepower unlike any other team. Alongside Shazam and 10s, he formed a core that, while unconventional, was uniquely effective for that era. This makes direct comparison difficult, as Zelsis' strengths were more intangible than Sick's. Nevertheless, let's compare their stats. Sick outperformed Zelsis in most fragging categories. Zelsis, however, played his role more faithfully, securing significantly more assists and a slightly lower first death ratio, which is desirable for an info-gathering flex player. Despite these minor advantages, Zelsis' motivational impact wasn't enough to surpass Sick's overall performance for his team, bringing it within 1 now. Moving on to the true initiators, the meta's evolution greatly influences this comparison. Let's examine Shazam and the Brazilian legend Saucy. While Shazam primarily played Sova, his comfort with Jet was evident, having been a primarily Jet player before 10s. Shazam utilized Sova to guide team decisions, as Sova was the must-pick at the time. However, his limited agent pool was a drawback. Teams like Fnatic used Skye on Haven, which was much more effective. Had 10s and Dapper not mastered Haven independently, Sentinels might have lost their perfect run here. Saucy, an established world-class initiator with Loud, demonstrated remarkable flexibility across the expanding initiator roster. He delivered consistent, impressive performances on all meta-related initiators. So to provide a fairer comparison, I'll exclude Shazam's Jet performances, as they had significantly more opportunities for multi-kills and first kills than Saucy ever had. Naturally, Shazam achieved higher fragging numbers still, which was his strength. Notably, he consistently won clutches as an initiator, fitting his playstyle perfectly, a feat Saucy didn't replicate as often. Saucy did have twice the assists per round, leveraging his info utility effectively. However, given Shazam's overwhelming lead in other categories, I'll have to surprisingly award him the win, making the overall score a tie. Finally, we reached the Duelists, a highly anticipated comparison between Prime Ten's 2021 and Zekken in 2024. Tenz's Reykjavik performance was legendary, establishing him as superior to his competition with surgical gameplay. Zekken in 2024 emerged from Tenz's shadow, proving himself a top player while remaining humble. In a more mature game landscape, Zekken's level of dominance was remarkable, especially given his team's overall performance. Now let's delve into the stats beyond Tenz's famous ACS. Zekken had a better first kill per round, headshot rate, and clutch rate, securing critical clutches in elimination matches, and only one less maximum kill in a map than Tenz. However, Tenz excelled in nearly every other metric. An 81% CAS, a significantly better rating, and a comparable first kill per round with a much lower first death rate. This highlights Tenz's duel win rate. It also reflects the changes in the duelist role from opening duels to space creation now. Objectively, Tenz's performance remains superior as the best duelist performance in a Masters event. Consequently, the 2021 team narrowly edges out the Madrid winners in this inherently subjective comparison. For a more in-depth look at Tenz and Sentinel's 2021 run, check out my video on Prime Tenz here, or choose the algorithm's mystery video suggestion.